Hello everybody, welcome back to the 1.0 Exploration series. We're finally at Miquella's Haligtree, even who we're gonna see right at the end of this. I'm sure a lot of you are looking forward to this. And I could definitely say there's a lot to talk about, so this is gonna be interesting. As things go, this is the third to last part of the series, so we are closing in on the end of it. So let's take it all in. But yeah, let's get into it. The map of the Haligtree looks different compared to what it is now, but this seemed to be a change later on with the patch, because this is what it looked like in patch 102 as well. Whenever I loaded in, it started off playing the Limgrave theme for a second or two. And then it switched to the Miquella's Haligtree track. And this does seem to happen every time I reloaded, so it's just a bug in the area. There's no stone sword key right next to the grace in this branch. We already noted that there's no Oracle envoys in Lindau, but they are here as they usually are. The only difference is that their bows are actually blue, like the Clayman, instead of gold. And after killing some, it doesn't seem like they dropped the white flesh in this version. As for the bubbles, the same goes for the large envoys. They're also blue. This is probably something I should have noticed a long time ago, but it seems like all the cured meat is just called jerky in this version. There's no My Beloved carving, so it seems like the only carving in the game is the You're Beautiful one, which is probably for box quest.
You're beautiful.
The giant envoy dropped his great horn, but it was a random drop still. I did double check afterwards. Speaking of which, those giant envoys do have blue bubbles as well. Going down this branch, the Newman's rune is in explosive clumps in 1.0. In this little segment, all of the envoys seem a lot weaker for some reason. I was able to one or two shot all of them. But surprisingly, the Oracle envoy ashes are still there. And lastly, for the branch segment, there's no lost ash of war here, near the statue. Over in the Haligtree Town, there's no Pale Drake Talisman +2, but we did already collect that one in the Consecrated Snowfields. It just wasn't replaced by anything, it seems. There's no Somber 9 in this little segment. After the tricky jump, we still can find the Viridian Amber Medallion +2. The Battle Mage's normal Pew Pew spell are a different color, like some other things we've seen in this game. When I killed one, it dropped the Haima Glintstone Crown, although it's called the Haima Stone Mask, when that's supposed to be a set drop from an enemy in Altas. And just completely randomly, I got the Meteorite Staff, the one that I've been told multiple times you can just farm from enemies like this. But this is a good time to mention, I believe no item that usually has an enhancing effect, like the Meteorite Staff enhancing gravity spells. I don't believe that effect exists in 1.0 yet. The Meteorite Staff doesn't mention it at the very least. The Smithing Stone 8 is replaced by an Albinaric Blood Clot, and there's no Heroes Rune 4 in this platform. Going on to the Loretta fight, the fight does seem pretty identical. The only difference I noticed is that Loretta's multi-bow shot forms a rhombus shape instead of shooting in a straight line as normal, but it didn't necessarily seem harder to dodge at least. When killed, she still dropped her spell, but she did not drop the War Sickle. After the Loretta, there's also no chest with the ancient stone in it. Now going into Elphael, the Miquella's Haligtree song is still playing in this segment, instead of switching over to the proper Elphael OST, and it did seem to have the same Limgrave bug as well. I didn't find any exploding foot soldiers in Elphael. There wasn't any at the beginning, but across the whole level I didn't see any of them. Just a couple of normal foot soldiers. The Miquella Knight Sword has an int requirement instead of faith, and it does magic damage instead of holy as well. The Ash of War is square off instead of Sacred Blade, but it does still have the same R2s as normal. The triple Rings of Light are called Miquella's Rings of Light. If that name sounds familiar, it's because the Cleanrot Knight's Halo Scythe. That's what the Ash of War is called. This little corner with the Golden Rune 10 has poisoned bone darts instead. Cleanrot Knight Finlay is called Cleanrot Knight Finlay's Ashes, as some of the other ones have so far. The Seedbed Curse is where the Somber Ancient Stone is supposed to be, around the corner, which makes more sense here, to be honest, than being out in the open. But the Somber isn't where the Seedbed will turn out to be, it's just empty. The Putrid Avatar in the bridge does not drop the Rotten Staff. The Golden Rune that's supposed to be outside of the Marika Source Seal room is actually inside it in 1.0. Revenants don't drop Gloveworts, or at least it's a lot more inconsistent. This specific Crystallion in this room is a normal one and not a rot one, it seemed. He died in one hit, so it does seem to have scaling like the normal ones at least. The Smithing Stone 8 here is a root resin 1.0, not rot resin. I've been calling them rot resin this entire series, I think, so that's gonna be fun to edit when I get the full compilated video together. There's no Spare Flame arrows in this room right here, and there's also no Haligtree Soldier Ashes. If you approach the bridge before the Avatar, the enemies start running to you instead of shooting the ballistas, when they do shoot you in other situations. Instead of there being Haligtree Knights next to the Avatar, there's Cleanrot Knights. The Avatar does not drop Lord's Rune, there's no Sacramental Bud next to where the Avatar was, and there's no Haligtree Knight Helm either. Before we proceed, since we have all 5 Seedbed Curses now, the only one that seemed missing is the Blackguard's one. I did go to do Dung Eater's questline thing, and everything seemed the same. You still get the Mending Rune as well. Although I did notice he freaked out on me when I triggered the dialogue. There's no chest with the rotten crystal sword in it next to these crystallians. The Hero's Rune 5 here next to this chalice is smoldering butterflies instead in 1.0. There's no Kindred of Rot enemy when dropping down to this little corner with the item in the Rot Lake, which thank God. And the item itself is Poison Stone Clump in 1.0 instead of Rot Grease. You can do Millicent's quest without killing the tree spirit, which is very appreciated. When doing the helping Millicent sign, the gold one, she's the one that has the red hue instead of her sisters. They can apparently fall out of the map. But overall, this encounter was insane. This might single-handedly be the most frustrating thing I've had to do in Elden Ring. They all do a ton of damage, especially with the Ashes of War, and they all seem to prioritize you if you get too close to them. Millicent is far more useless, she doesn't do nearly enough damage, she doesn't seem to be able to heal herself, and she's very prone to falling off the map. I ended up just cheesing Elphael's Mist, which I don't think you can do in current patch, but I seriously couldn't be bothered. I tried them for an hour and was not even close to killing them, when I first tried them in current patch. You probably have to try it yourself to believe it's harder, even though it seems the same at the surface, but it's not worth it, and I'm so happy that it was fine-tuned at launch. On a brighter note, the rotted winged swords insignia is called accessory name, so we got another kind of placeholder name. I did test the damage increase, so it does seem to be corresponding to the talisman. It's just not a finished item. Oh, and you may also notice that hitting the turtle pulp is different, and apparently it just turns into a normal turtle after you hit him. It just starts walking around. Going back to Gowry, you can press to talk on him, but he doesn't say anything. And he also has a buggy death, but he still drops the Flux Canvas Talisman, thankfully. As I was getting the other character to the Haligtree, I noticed that the Albinauric bow is called Silverbow in 1.0. But getting back there, if you do the red Millicent sign to fight her, there's only one sister as normal, but she's also fighting you instead of Millicent. Typical co-invader. There doesn't even seem to be friendly fire, so that was silly. When you defeat her, Millicent's prosthesis has the Valkyrie's prosthesis design, but it does seem to have the same function. I noticed afterwards that you still had access to the gold sign when you don't have access to the red one if you did gold first in 1.0. I did do it and I still got the reward, meaning that I got both alternate rewards in one character, meaning you should fight Millicent first if you want to get both. Going forward a bit, these Aeonian butterflies are Poison Bloom in 1.0. This Hero Runes 5 is a Hero's Rune, which could be corresponding to this, I don't know yet. And the Ghost Glowwort's Picker's Bell is called Ghost Form Picker's Bell. It might be the case that all the names have this trend, and I may have not noticed until now. In the room right next to Malenia's Grace, there's no Aeonia flower here, nor the Traveler's set, but there's still a couple of butterflies around, albeit fewer. Now onto Malenia herself. When you die to her, she has an additional line of dialogue that she doesn't in post-release.
Now do you understand? I am Malenia, Blade of Miquella.
The same thing happened with Moog, and just like in his case, I actually think this sounds more complete with a full line there. I can't exactly say why I decided to cut it. This seems perfectly reasonable to have that there. Maybe they thought it was more memeable, I have no idea. Malenia can do waterfall dance right from the beginning. It was one of the first moves she did for me in one of the attempts. You seem to still be able to dodge the beginning of it if you surround her, and maybe roll at the end. Dodging the second set can sometimes clip you at the very end if you dodge backwards. And the third set, you can't just walk toward her and dodge. She seems to track you much more heavily. So that was the hardest part to figure out for this old waterfowl. I didn't really figure it out at all, I would say, but I'm also no Malenia expert. I tried using the freezing and bleed pots to stagger her out of waterfowl, but it didn't seem to work like in post-release. And apparently she has an entirely cut attack, which is a walking waterfall dance. It looks very janky, so I'm not surprised they cut it. Perhaps they didn't have time to polish it. But even if that wasn't the case, it's a little bit extra to have two sets of the same attack. That could also be the reason they cut it. It's not nearly as hard to dodge as the normal one, but it can be a little inconsistent. Mind you, I didn't get to practice it a lot. But it does seem like if you have time to run away from it, that does help avoid it for the most part. For phase 2, she can do the Scarlet Aeonia attack immediately after having done the first one. Doesn't matter what HP she's at. Her waterfall dance in this phase does not cause Scarlet Rod buildup. During her Phantom attack, she lunges at you before the last Phantom strikes itself, so it's a little bit tricky if you're used to the post-release version. And she can still do the walking waterfall as well. For the rest of the fight, it did seem pretty much the same to me. I didn't notice anything major. The damage I took seemed reasonable. But if there's anything I missed, like perhaps she doesn't do a certain combo or an attack I just didn't realize I never saw, you can let me know as well. When you beat her, Malenia's death dialogue gets all dumped to you at once her HP reaches 0, instead of being broken into 2 parts, before and after you receive the rewards, but the actual dialogue is the same. She still leaves behind the wilted flower, and you can still get a Miquella's needle, except you'll get a normal ancient dragon stone instead of a somber one. Going to check Malenia's rewards, Hand of Malenia is called the Hand of Malenia in 1.0, but aside from that, it has a lot less dex requirements, and the scaling seems a bit different as well. Not talking to Gideon about the whole Haligtree situation. The alternating dialogue is still off like in Mogwin. He did give the Black Flames protection, but it's called Protector of the Godslayer. And for the last reward, the dialogue was iffy again, and Lord's Divine Fortification was called Guiding Divine Fortification in 1.0. After doing this, if you talk to him again, he has no more dialogue prompts since everything's complete now. But in post-release, he does normally have just a brief dialogue with you before not talking to you anymore. And that is all for the video. So that cut Malenia attack, huh? That definitely caught me a lot off guard. Whenever she started doing it, I thought I was seeing a move that I was like, wait, should I know what this is? And then nope, all of a sudden she's doing waterfall on my face. It was really confusing and caught me completely off guard. But I almost would have taken that attack to be the one that she does because it's a little bit easier to deal with. Even spam rolling wasn't an awful way to survive that attack. But nevertheless, I assume they cut it for the reasons I mentioned. But it's something I hadn't seen before. I think I've seen people talk about the cut line of dialogue, but not anything else besides that. But it could be that I just haven't searched enough. Before starting the series, only briefly looked into what people have talked about 1.0 so far, so maybe it could have been talked about later or I just didn't check hard enough. Anyway, 2 more parts in this series is over. And I do want to give a heads up that for the day that the last part releases, I will be posting a community post. And that post is going to be solely for the purposes of all of you who have knowledge of 1.0 to post things in there that I missed in the entire series. Whether it's thing you already commented on before or anything recent that I missed. I would suggest leaving it to then. Or, you know, if it's something for this video, you can still comment it here. But for anything that'll correct for the compiled, complete video with all the parts, that'll be the best place to put it. I will check all the previous comments from the last year or so, but it's just best to have them all concise in the same place. It's not out yet. I will make it a big note in the last video when that comes out, but I'm just giving you a heads up to get that list ready if you want to. Anyway, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video. As I said, we're coming in at the end, so if you're new here, there's a whole playlist of things that we already discussed. You can catch up before we reach the end in a couple of weeks here, and hopefully you'll join me for that. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope to see you again. Bye-bye.